All right, welcome everybody. So we're going to hit a couple of different elements of one particular theory today. There's lots to choose from. There's Piaget, there's Erik Erikson stuff that's super interesting, and then Marsh's identity development, and then the parenting styles. I mean, they're all really interesting things, so it's kind of hard for me to pick one. But I really like this discussion of moral development. It seems like it's relevant in a lot of ways for all of us. So we're going to do Lawrence Kohlberg's theory of moral development. And I'm going to push you to, the book breaks them down by three pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional broad stages. But Kohlberg actually developed 6 stages. And so I'm going to teach you those ones, and you can fit them into those pre-conventional and post-conventional. Let's see. So to begin with, take a look at this. So let me have somebody read this out loud if you can. Who do I got today? I've got Darcy, Rachel, and who else?
Jackie.
Yeah, there it is. Well, it was weird. Like usually they have your name right next to it, but I for some reason couldn't see it, Jackie. Jackie, will you read it for us? Just this paragraph, and then I'll flip to the next slide.
Yeah. Moral dilemma example. A woman is near death from cancer. There is one drug that will save her, but it is sold by a druggist who is charging $2,000 for it, 10 times the cost to make it. The sick woman's husband, Heinz, is that how you say his name?
Totally.
Can't afford the drug and attempts to borrow the money from everyone he knew.
Keep going.
However, Heinz can only raise $1,000, and the druggist refused to sell it for a cheaper price or let Heinz pay later. So Heinz got desperate and broke into the man's store to steal the drug for his wife. Should Heinz have done that? Why or why not?
So this is actually the original dilemma that Kohlberg used in his study. And from this, he sort of created and evolved a theory of moral development. Right now, if you think about stage theories, there's like earlier stages and later stages. But I'm really curious. I know it's tricky because we're in this religious context, and I think that sort of impacts the answers. But I'm curious what you would do, and not necessarily interested as much in whether you'd steal a drug or wouldn't steal a drug, but rather why you would steal it or why you would not steal it. Does that make sense? So tell me, I'm going to just ask the three of you if you would steal it or not steal it, and either way, why you would not or why you would. So let's start with Rachel.
So I would probably steal it, to be honest. Mostly because I discussed this with my husband last night, because there is that social dilemma where it's like, oh, it is wrong to steal, and it's, it's bad. But I feel like the value of my husband's life would be more important to me than the consequences of me going to jail or whatever. I would rather at least he would be alive, even though that I would be facing other consequences, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So it's tricky. I'm trying to unpack what you're saying. And really you're saying you'd steal it because human life maybe is more important to you than this principle of stealing or not stealing. And then you sort of added at the end this other idea, I think, that's sort of separate but but similar, and that you'd sort of be willing to face the consequences of said action, and that you'd be fine with that knowing that he'd be alive. Something like that. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
Perfect. Good. All right, Darcy, you're up.
So I actually agree with Rachel because, like, I know that thou shalt not steal is a commandment, and I know that because of my religious training. However, I believe that human life is more important than the money that the druggist would make. I'd probably drop off $1,000 too and be like, here's your $1,000 that I have, but I'm also stealing this because my husband's life is more important than this.
Yeah. And in that sense, Darcy, if you can elaborate, right? His life's more important to you than that principle. Why?
Because I think more important than any principle is human life.
Okay.
Like Rachel said, I would rather face the consequences of my action, but have a husband who's alive versus not do everything that I could but fail to raise $1,000 extra and then he died because of it.
Yeah. So there's an element of like an obligation to protect human life in a way.
Yeah.
That overrides that. I like it. All right, Jackie, what do you got?
Well, I have my little 5-year-old here, and she's telling me to tell you that I would not steal it.
Yeah. That's a lot of pressure.
So yeah, in her view, I should not steal it because stealing's wrong, huh? But what if it saved Daddy's life? I think that obviously I agree with both Darcy and Rachel. I would steal it as well. And then I would pay the consequences, whatever they were, as long as he was alive. Maybe I would tell the druggist I'll give it back if it doesn't work or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, we would give him the money that we had raised, and I would try to pay, it off if I wasn't in jail. But I would do the same thing. Yeah,
it's powerful. When you think about stories like this, something like Les Mis comes to mind, right? I don't know if you're familiar with that story, but there's sort of like these two extremes, right? There's sort of like, on the one hand, the convention and the order that's created from the convention. And then on the other hand, there's the absolute anarchy that exists. And there's like a sweet spot somewhere in between those two polar opposites. And that's really what this moral dilemma is about, trying to understand. And then he sort of took people's answers just like yours, and he kind of qualified and coded them, and then he created a hierarchy from it. So we're going to go through this, but I want to hit you with a couple other questions that I don't think will change your answers. They might. What's really interesting, if I don't say to the class, I know you're in a religious setting, and give me your genuine answer. Universally, people, if I don't say that in this class, in BYU Idaho classes, everybody says don't steal the drug. Everybody does. It's really weird. But if I say that, just that little bit, everyone says, oh, I'd steal it. And then when I do this at SUU, right, a secular school, it's a mix, right? But anyway, it's interesting. Just the context pressures us in profound ways, I think. That's interesting, and really like more of like a social pressure. But let me ask you guys this. Does Heinz have a duty to steal a drug? Does he obliged to steal a drug? And if so, does anyone feel that way, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, you kind of alluded to that. What is the obligation to do?
Well, I feel like, when we get married, we are putting ourselves under an obligation to take care of our spouse and to, do the best we can, till death do us part or whatever, without the religious background or whatever. But, and I think that's where the duty lies, is you've made promises to your spouse. And if you're not willing to help them save their life, then I don't know, I guess nothing else would matter. Yeah.
I like it. And that sort of pulls out another element that you'll see is really related to this moral hierarchy, this theory. This is a great one. But suppose the person dying was not his wife, but a random stranger. Then I would ask each of you really quick, if you can. Darce, or let's start at the top. Rachel, what would you do?
I think I would be a little bit different because I wouldn't have any obligation to that person. I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess, I don't know.
Tricky. It changes it, right?
Yeah.
I don't think it does.
Maybe it doesn't change it.
I just have this moral obligation to human life. I mean, you wouldn't you wouldn't walk up to a stranger or swim up to a stranger who's drowning and leave them. So if you walked up to a stranger who's dying and says, I absolutely have to have this drug or I'm going to die, like, to me, it's the same situation. It's an emergency situation.
Yeah.
But what happens if, like, you do that for a stranger and then the obligation to your family, you go to jail. So now you can't, raise your children anymore or be with your family anymore. Maybe by stealing the drug for that stranger puts your family at risk. And that's where my concern would be is, does it take me out of being available to be here for my family if I were to save a stranger? Which makes it harder, but I agree with you. There's no way I could stand there and watch somebody drown. I don't know what I would do.
Yeah.
So wait, Jackie, this is interesting in the sense that when you think about it, then bring it back into the reason why it would make a difference if it was a stranger or not is why, Jackie?
Because of my obligation to that person, because of where my responsibilities as a mother are at right now. Maybe if I didn't have a family to take care of.
Okay. So you're sort of saying I would not steal it because I couldn't guarantee that the sort of like the protection of my own family.
Yeah. What would happen to my own family if I was not there anymore?
Yeah. Great. It's perfect, right? Like, it's interesting because it sort of changes stuff a bit, right? Rachel saying maybe you wouldn't, and if it's me, I don't know if I would either if it was a stranger. I mean, kind of hate to say that, because that kind of thing happens all the time, right? But there is something about my own family, especially kids and wife, right? Like, I think that would change things profoundly, at least for me, right? As I just sort of look at it. What about this one, number 5? What if no one, not even the druggist, knew that you had stolen the drug? Would that impact your decision to either steal or not steal?
I think it would.
Doris, how?
I mean, are we talking about the stranger still?
No, this is your spouse.
Oh, I definitely would. If it's my spouse.
How come?
Because I guess I don't understand, like, if he didn't know that I stole it, like, versus he knew I stole it, that wouldn't change my actions of stealing the drug for my spouse.
Okay. So it maybe is an irrelevant piece to some.
Yeah.
Not only is he an immoral person for not just letting you have the drug, but he's a bad shopkeeper.
Yeah.
He can't keep track of his stuff, right?
He left it out and available. You can.
It's almost like he wanted you to take it.
My secret.
He wanted you to take it. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? I mean, this introduces, I think, an element of social pressure, right? And in this case, it sort of removes it, and maybe that makes it more likely without the social pressure of anyone knowing that we stole it. Then maybe we would be more likely to do it. It's tricky. These are great. So there's lots of iterations of this that we could talk about, but let's get to Kohlberg stuff, right? We're going to do this quickly now as we kind of bust through these stages, but I want you to think really carefully because you had a bunch of different responses. Think about where your responses would fall, right? Fit them into these 6 stages, and I think you'll understand the theory better, and you'll for sure remember it better. So Kohlberg did this exact thing. He presented this particular moral dilemma, the Heinz dilemma, to all the participants. And then he just said, what would you do and why? He didn't really care about what they would do, like whether they would or would not steal it. He just wanted to know why they would steal it. And from that created his 6 stages of moral development.
Okay.
Right? So here they are. The pre-conventional is described as a self-interest stage. The conventional is more about society norms, and the post-conventional is about abstract principles. The way that I've defined each stage is not like an official name, but it's what the meaning of the stage is, if that makes sense. So stage 1 is pain is not good for me. Now, what you got to do with each of these stages is think about them from this perspective. I'm making my moral decision for this reason. That in a sense, in stage 1, I'm trying to avoid pain. So I choose to lie to avoid pain, or I choose to steal to avoid pain, right? So, and a great example of this, just to be clear, this is not my kid, but this little girl, I like how it's like a 5-point harness. But let's pretend for a second that she lied. Its consequence for lying is that you get duct taped to the wall and your adorable ducky gets strangled next to you. I like how she's like grabbing it for comfort. But Rach, explain, how does this fit stage 1? Future decisions that this little girl would make, how would it fit?
She would avoid whatever would cause that pain.
Good. So let's say lying, put it in that context. What would she do?
She wouldn't lie, or she'd avoid lying, or depending on, yeah.
Good. Now explain that. You're on the right track. She'd avoid lying because why?
Because she wouldn't want to be duct taped to the wall again.
Perfect. And then you said, or she would lie.
Or she would lie because maybe the consequences of whatever had happened or whatever.
There could be a more painful outcome.
Yeah.
That would make getting duct taped to the wall worth it. Right?
Yeah.
So I think to some degree you could sort of twist some of your responses into this one, right? Maybe if you said something like, I don't think you guys said this, but if it hurts more to lose him than it does to go to jail, I'd steal it. That would be stage 1. Why? Why, Darcy?
That would be stage 1 because pain is not good. So, and I mean, it's kind of a self-interest. Oh, well, it is a self-interest.
Oh, you're right. That's the way you got to think about both of these 2 stages.
Yeah.
It's what's avoiding the most pain, essentially. And that dictates my moral reasoning. And then you're starting to get a sense of this. All right, so that's stage 1. Pain is not good. Stage 2 is the punishment obedience orientation. And in this case, it's really simple. It's what is right avoids, I'm still on stage 1. Stage 2 is instrumental exchange. And what's right is what benefits myself. So whatever kind of feels good, if I get a reward or receive some kind of pleasure, I'm going to do whatever it is that I'm trying to decide. So for the Heinz dilemma, what would that look like? Let's go, Jackie.
Whatever benefits myself. I don't want to be without a spouse, and so I would steal it.
Totally. Right? I mean, you might say Heinz should steal the drug because then his wife could get better and cook for him. Yeah. That sort of really cheapens it. But yeah, right? But you could even say, I love their presence so much. Being around my spouse, I would steal the drug because I wouldn't want to lose that. Mm-hmm. That's definitely stage 2. Why? Because I make the moral decision to have this particular benefit. Now let's make it really practical. I ask my students this one all the time. I used to say, have you ever downloaded music illegally? And no one would raise their hand. But if I said, do you know somebody that you like and care about, who has ever downloaded music illegally or ever watched a movie or a TV show that you didn't pay for essentially? Raise your hands. And if I do that, if I ask you guys that, do you know someone that's ever done that is close to you? What would you say? Would you raise your hand? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can't see Rach, but she says yes. Okay. How would that be stage 2, Rachel?
Because nobody knows that they did it except for you, I guess.
Yeah, kind of. But does it feel good to watch the movie?
Yes.
Even though you know stealing is wrong and it's technically stealing. So you change your moral reasoning and say, feels good, gonna steal. But you don't say that explicitly, but you make a moral decision based on it feels good to watch that movie or listen to that song right now. That's definitely stage 2.
All right.
Kind of cool, right? Okay. All right, stage 3. Now we just left pre-conventional, that self-interest one. We move into the conventional level, right? This is about societal norms. In this case, I'm going to do what I'm going to do because it gets me approval. I follow the social expectation or the social pressures, right? In BYU, Idaho, the social pressure, Darce, would be what?
At BYU, Idaho,
To steal or not to steal?
not to steal.
Yeah, right. Why?
Because it's wrong.
We think morally
Because it's a commandment.
it is a commandment, right? And so we feel that social pressure. That's why in other classes, if there's like, sometimes I've had like 10 or 15 people come to the meetings. And if the first person says, I'd never steal because stealing is wrong, everybody else says the same thing. Why? Because they feel that social pressure. We make moral decisions based on what we think other people want us to do. And I think this is a really great one to consider, right? I mean, how much of our worship in the gospel of Jesus Christ is based on that thing? And if you think about it, if it is based on that thing, why is that problematic, Jackie?
Well, it stops you from progressing when you are doing things because you feel like that's what you should do because that's what other people think you should do.
Yeah. Okay. I think it could stop you, like sort of doing it maybe for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, I think, as a young mom, I certainly felt a lot of pressure to do different things than I feel as an older mom now, which I'm like, hey, I'm just doing my best.
Amen to that, man. Yeah.
Just doing our best and they'll survive.
I think it hits at that level, I think, a lot, right? In some ways, it's not a bad thing because we maybe pray and read scriptures and at the very least we go to church a lot of times just because of the social pressure. And in a way that kind of carries us. But I think it gets really problematic when the foundation of your testimony gets rocked, right? When serious trials happen, if you haven't been doing the kinds of things that matter, you've just been doing the visible things because of social pressure, you're probably in real trouble then, right? So like in that sense, again, like it's worth thinking about what we're doing and why we do it. All right, so that's stage 3. Stage 1, pain is not good. Stage 2, Darce, is?
What's in it for me?
What feels good. Stage 3 then, Rachel, is? What gets me? I can't hear you.
Gosh.
I go to church because?
Oh, because it looks good. Because
Good.
everybody's doing it. Social norms.
Perfect. Good. Stage 4 is about law and order. In this case, there's like an understanding that rules and laws matter and they create order. They prevent us from having like chaos, really, right? Anarchy. Like in that sense, there's a double yellow line when we're driving, Jackie, and I don't cross the double yellow line when I drive. Why?
Because it's against the law.
Okay, now against the law would put me at a different stage, but in this stage, I would say.
Because you could hurt somebody?
Yeah, right. I want people to always respect the double line rule because I don't want some other dude or lady in my lane coming straight at me, right? Right. I get that it matters that we all follow the rules because the rules sort of protect, in a way, all of us. So what would be a statement in stage 4? Whose turn is it? I don't know. Rachel, what do you think?
What do you mean? Sorry.
Like, what would be a response to Kohlberg's Heinz dilemma that would put you in stage 4? Laws matter. They create social harmony.
It's funny that you say that because my mom actually responded to this and she said that you don't steal because it's wrong and because it's against the law. But if you break the law and if everybody breaks the law, then our entire society would be thrown into chaos. Yeah. So you have to follow the law or chaos will ensue.
Perfect. Right. And so you could sort of say, I might steal the drug, but I'd have to be willing to pay the price, the consequence, the social consequence of the stealing the drug. And again, like part of your answer sort of fit in that one as well. So this is the societal norms, conventional level. We have 2, right? One's what other people think about me, or what I think they think about me, rather. And 2 is laws matter, they've got to be maintained. Now, the next 2 are tricky. Kohlberg didn't believe that a lot of people got to these stages, but at the very least, many people could get to stage 5. In this case, What's right is what stems from an understanding of the social mutuality and care and welfare for other people. Now, to be fair, I think lots of your responses could really fit here, right? View laws as rules that are flexible instruments, right? We go beyond just the spirit or the letter of the law and more into sort of like the spirit of the law. This abstract principle, rather than like a specific hard and fast thing that is immutable and can't ever change. That's tricky though, right? Because who decides what's flexible enough? And then if you're like a dictator, like a, I don't know, say like a Adolf Hitler or a Mao, right, in China, then the flexible but fair is very different and potentially problematic. And then finally, stage 6 is what's called the universal ethical principle. Kohlberg didn't believe that anybody really got here. It's the rare person, people like Martin Luther King Jr. or Mahatma Gandhi, people like that, Mother Teresa, that kind of thing. And in this case, what's right's based on these principles of equality and the worth of all human beings. So to wrap up, walk me through the stages really quick. We got pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. Pre-conventional is all about self-interest, right? First stage was, Rach, what?
The first stage was, what does it benefit me?
Yeah, well, no, that's second stage.
Oh.
First stage is I make moral decisions to avoid what?
Pain.
Step 2 then is I make moral decisions to get some benefit. Then we move into conventional. Stage 3 is, Darce, what?
Interpersonal cooperation, so like social pressure.
Yep, social approval. Stage 4 then, Jackie, would be?
Let's see, laws matter and have to be maintained.
Yep, like we don't want chaos, right? We want order. Good. And then 5 is flexible but fair, and 6 is this universal ethical orientation. You guys got it? Cool. So that is where we are going to end today. So we went through these stages. I think you have a good idea of them. Make sure you understand each of the 6, but for sure pre-conventional and post-conventional.